Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, has become pivotal for protecting today's distributed enterprises. By converging networking and security like SD-WAN, CASP, FWAS, ZTNA, and SWG into a cloud-based service, SASE promises secure connectivity for remote workers and cloud apps. Yet, despite its robust framework, the weakest link in SASE environments often lies in misconfigurations and human vulnerabilities, a technical loophole that attackers readily exploit. Recent surveys indicate that, with the shift to remote work, only 4% of organizations feel confident that their users are fully protected. This really highlights how human error and poor security configuration have emerged as perhaps the biggest threat to SASE deployments, undermining the very protections they aim to provide. Thank you for tuning into your SASE Gateway YouTube channel. Subscribe if you want more straightforward content like this about SASE and cybersecurity topics. Misconfigurations and credential weaknesses are, without a doubt, the number one risk vector. Even the best security architecture can be undone by configuration mistakes or lax credential security. In practice, misconfiguration of remote access services, such as leaving remote desktop protocol servers openly accessible or failing to enforce multi-factor authentication, has become a top attack vector in the SASE era. For example, millions of RDP ports are exposed online due to improper configuration, which just provides cyber criminals with easy entry points. The 2021 Colonial Pipeline breach, which led to fuel shortages in the United States, was enabled by a single exposed VPN password with no MFA. Attackers simply found valid credentials and logged in remotely. Misuse of remote access is now the fourth most common initial breach vector, according to Verizon data. These cases underscore that poorly configured remote access and identity controls are a gravely significant threat. Compounding this risk is the persistent problem of weak or stolen credentials among remote users. Fortinet reports that one of the biggest threats to companies' remote workforces is the ongoing use of weak, insecure, or recycled passwords, which basically renders even strong network defenses moot. In the absence of MFA, attackers can crack or reuse passwords to impersonate employees and bypass SASE defenses. Phishing campaigns and social engineering thrive on this weakness. 51% of organizations report that phishing is the most common method by which attackers steal cloud credentials. Once credentials are compromised, an attacker can often bypass SASE protections by appearing as an authorized user. Cloud configuration errors are equally perilous. SASE relies on cloud-delivered security services, and any misstep in cloud security settings can open a backdoor. IBM's analysis found that 15% of breaches originate from cloud misconfigurations, making it the third most common cause of breaches. Misconfigured storage buckets, overly permissive access policies, or unpatched virtual appliances can leak data or permit unauthorized access. Gartner analysts even predict that by 2025, 99% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault, like misconfigurations, a stark reminder that human IT errors are a bigger threat than any single malware strain. In essence, the biggest threat to a SASE environment is not a specific hacker tool, but the gap left by human fallibility. The VPN left unpatched, the admin who disabled an inspection rule, the user with password 123 on their account, or the cloud app deployed with default settings. When misconfigurations of weak credentials let attackers slip past SASE controls, the fallout can directly compromise everyday people, both the remote employees and the wider public, depending on the targeted enterprise. Here are a few ways this threat manifests. Silent network breaches via allowed channels. Once an attacker gains a foothold on a remote worker's device or account, they often use stealth techniques to avoid detection. A prime example is DNS tunneling, where malware hides its communication inside DNS queries. Since DNS is usually allowed through networks, attackers leverage DNS tunneling as a convenient way to exfiltrate data and gain access to a network because DNS communications are often unblocked. Recent malware campaigns like the Bazaar Call or BazaLoader scam use DNS tunnels to talk to command and control servers quietly. This means a remote employee's infected laptop could be leaking confidential data or receiving attacker commands over DNS without triggering traditional security alerts. Such covert channels bypass poorly configured security filters, putting personal and corporate data at risk. Ransomware and system takeovers. Misconfigured remote access can directly lead to ransomware attacks that impact employees' daily work. Criminal groups like the Conti Gang have exploited open RDP ports to deploy ransomware on corporate networks. Once inside via an unsecured RDP or VPN, attackers scan the internal network and unleash malware that locks down files and systems. For a remote worker, this could mean suddenly losing access to all company resources and data on their device. The Colonial Pipeline incident is a sobering case. By exploiting a single VPN account, the DarkSide group encrypted critical systems, halting pipeline operations. Not only were the company's employees affected, unable to do their jobs, but consumers across the United States East Coast felt the impact through fuel shortages, illustrating how a breach through remote access can compromise everyday people on a broad scale. Data breaches and privacy leaks. When attackers bypass SASE defenses, they often target sensitive personal data that remote employees handle. Insider threats, whether malicious or just negligent, are a big part of this risk. A striking recent example is the 2023 Tesla breach. 2 insiders, former employees, stole and leaked 75,000 others' data, including names, addresses, social security numbers, and more. This shows that even with SASE's zero trust principles, a trusted insider or compromised account can export massive amounts of data if monitoring is insufficient. Similarly, a negligent remote worker on an unsecured home network might inadvertently expose confidential files, which attackers then snatch. The result is that employees' private information or customers' data can end up in the public domain, leading to identity theft, financial loss, and reputational damage. In one case, Microsoft employees accidentally exposed login credentials to internal systems on GitHub. A simple mistake that could have given attackers a gateway to sensitive Azure servers. Such incidents demonstrate how a single misstep can compromise the personal and professional data of thousands of individuals. Persistent threats via unpatched vulnerabilities. Human error also includes failing to patch known security holes promptly. Notorious bugs like Log4j or Log4Shell continue to plague organizations well into 2024. Cato Networks Threat Labs note that Log4j remains a highly popular vulnerability that attackers attempt to exploit. Suppose a remote worker's device or a cloud app in the SASE framework hasn't been patched for Log4j. In that case, an attacker can hijack it by simply sending a malicious string, gaining a foothold to snoop on communications or steal data. Old, unpatched vulnerabilities give attackers an easy path to compromise even everyday users who are unaware their software is outdated. This is a technical threat that thrives on configuration management failures. In all these scenarios, enterprise remote users bear the brunt of the impact. Their work devices or accounts are commandeered, their personal information and communications are exposed, and their productivity is disrupted. Moreover, because remote workers often serve as the bridge between home and corporate networks, an initial compromise of one person can quickly spread across the cloud and on-prem systems SASE is meant to protect. Studies have found that breaches involving remote work cost approximately $1 million more on average than those without a remote component, roughly $5 million versus $4 million per breach, due to the expanded attack surface and the complexity of the response. In short, the biggest threat, misconfigurations and human lapses, turns remote employees into unwitting entry points for attacks that can snowball into large-scale breaches or outages. To illustrate how this top threat unfolds, let's consider a couple of recent cases and trends. Colonial Pipeline 2021. The initial cause was a single set of VPN credentials for a remote account that was leaked, and no multi-factor authentication was in place, allowing attackers to access the network remotely. The outcome was ransomware that encrypted pipeline control systems, causing a week-long shutdown. The impact on people? 75% of gas stations in certain states ran out of fuel, causing widespread panic among the public. This case really highlights how a misconfiguration, lack of MFA on VPN, and an exposed password resulted in severe real-world consequences. Tesla insider leak 2023. The initial cause was two insiders working remotely who intentionally exfiltrated the data they had access to. They abused legitimate credentials and access to steal files. The outcome was the personal data of 75,000 employees and sensitive company information leaked to the media. The impact on people was that tens of thousands of individuals had their private details exposed, risking identity theft and eroding trust. Demonstrates that a malicious insider or a compromised insider account can bypass many controls, highlighting the importance of airtight monitoring and data loss prevention in SASE environments. BazaLoader DNS tunneling 2021. The initial cause was a phishing scam called Bazaar Call that tricked users into downloading malware. That malware then installed Anchor, which used DNS tunneling to communicate with its command and control servers. The outcome? Despite firewall and web filtering, the malware's DNS queries allowed it to receive instructions and possibly exfiltrate data, since DNS was permitted traffic. The impact on people was that infected remote machines could be controlled by attackers without obvious signs, potentially leading to data theft or staging of ransomware, all while evading traditional defenses. This example highlights the importance of inspecting DNS traffic in SASE solutions. Otherwise, attackers can ride inside an allowed service like DNS to compromise systems. Log4j exploitation attempts 2022 to 2024. The initial cause was that many organizations were slow to patch the critical Log4j vulnerability. Threat actors widely scanned and attempted exploits on unpatched systems. The outcome was that any vulnerable server or application reachable by an attacker could be hijacked, giving complete control to run malware or access data. SASE environments that integrated cloud apps were at risk if those apps weren't updated. The impact on people was that unpatched remote applications could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data, as seen in some breaches or service disruptions. The persistence of Log4j in the wild emphasizes that neglected security hygiene, a form of misconfiguration, remains a top threat, even for organizations that have embraced modern architectures like SASE. These cases reinforce that it's not one single attack type, but a convergence of technical lapses, misconfigured services, weak identity protections, unpatched holes, or insider misuse that constitutes the most significant danger to SASE deployments. Attackers will readily use any available vector, such as phishing for credentials, exploiting an open port, tunneling through DNS, or bribing an insider to capitalize on those lapses. Defending against the human and configuration threat is honestly one of the most important challenges organizations face today. Addressing this paramount threat requires a mix of technology and training. Enterprises should enforce zero trust principles rigorously. Never trust, always verify, so that no user or device gets a free pass. This means mandating multi-factor authentication everywhere, closing the VPN and RDP loophole, and continuously monitoring user behavior and data flows to catch anomalies. These steps can help spot an insider exfiltrating gigabytes of data or a malware beaconing via DNS. It's also important to implement tight access controls based on the principle of least privilege. Keeping all SASE components and endpoints patched and up to date is equally critical, as known exploits like Log4j are actively used by attackers. On the human side, security teams really must invest in training remote employees, making them aware of phishing and social engineering tricks, and instilling good cyber hygiene, like using strong, unique passwords and avoiding unauthorized apps. After all, if every threat now is a person-based threat in some form, then raising user awareness is as vital as any firewall. In summary, the biggest threat to a SASE environment is not some novel zero-day malware, but the age-old issues of misconfiguration and human error manifesting in new ways. This threat compromises everyday people by turning remote workers into prime targets and points of entry, leading to stolen data, sabotage systems, and collateral damage that can ripple out to affect society at large. By recognizing this and shoring up the human and configuration elements of security, organizations can close the hidden loophole in SASE and truly reap its benefits in the work from anywhere era. So, the following are the key developments on the horizon for shoring up SASE against misconfigurations, credential weaknesses, DNS tunneling, insider threats, and unpatched vulnerabilities, especially for remote working enterprises. Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA, is maturing into the default access model. What's changing is that legacy VPNs will be supplanted mainly by ZTNA, which never implicitly trusts any connection, even if it originates from inside the network. Why does this help? By verifying every user application session based on identity, device posture, and contextual risk, ZTNA closes the gap created by exposed RDP or VPN ports and stolen credentials. And on the horizon, Gartner predicts that 70% of new remote access deployments will use ZTNA instead of VPN by the year 2025, according to Scalar. AI-driven automation for continuous threat detection and response is really transforming the security landscape. But what's changing? Well, manual, rule-based security is giving way to AI and machine learning pipelines that can ingest telemetry from endpoints, network flows, including DNS, and cloud logs in real time. Why does this help? Automated anomaly detection is able to spot those subtle DNS tunneling patterns or unusual credential use, even before a human notices a misconfiguration or successful phishing attempt. AI can then trigger containment actions like isolating a device without needing any manual intervention. Looking ahead, enterprises are embedding AI-powered threat scoring, behavioral baselining, and automated policy adjustments directly into their SASE platforms, such as Scalar and Open Systems. User and Entity Behavior Analytics, or UEBA, is quickly becoming the standard. So what's changing here? Beyond simply logging events, SASE consoles are now including built-in UEBA modules that actually learn normal user and device behaviors and flag any deviations. Why does this matter? Early detection of insider threats, whether malicious or accidental, really depends on recognizing abnormal data access patterns, like bulk downloads or unusual login times, so breaches can be contained before there's any mass exfiltration. And on the horizon, leading SASE providers now offer UEBA as a core service with real-time alerting on anomalous sessions like what Open Systems provides. Identity-driven security and passwordless authentication are definitely on the rise. What's changing is that organizations are moving toward truly passwordless multi-factor authentication like FIDO2 or WebAuthn and dynamic entitlement management. Why is this important? Eliminating passwords removes the top phishing and credential stuffing vector, which is huge. Real-time entitlement updates, provisioning and deprovisioning ensure that even if an account is compromised, its access scope is minimal and can be revoked quickly. Looking ahead, unified identity services are being integrated directly into SASE stacks, which allows for granular policy shifts the instant an identity risk is detected, as seen with Zscaler. Automated cloud security posture management and CIEM integration are, really changing the game. So what's changing here? Well, we're talking about continuous scanning of cloud configurations like storage buckets, IAM roles, and security groups, and these automatic remediation workflows that can actually thwart misconfiguration-driven breaches before they happen. At the same time, Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, or CIEM, will govern who can spin up resources. Why does this matter? Persistent misconfigurations are honestly a leading cause of cloud data leaks. Automated CSPM makes sure that policies like no public read buckets are enforced around the clock, which really helps close a common SASE loophole. And looking ahead, SASE platforms will be embedding CSPM and CIEM modules, or tightly integrating with specialized CSPM vendors for that set and forget policy compliance. Single vendor SASE consolidation and open ecosystems are becoming more important than ever. So what's changing? To cut down on complexity and misalignments, more enterprises are starting to standardize on a single SASE vendor, or maybe a tightly orchestrated multi-vendor ecosystem with open APIs. The big benefit here is that fewer disparate consoles mean, well, fewer misconfigurations. Open APIs also let security teams codify and automate configuration drift checks across all components like SD-WAN, SWG, CSB, ZTNA, and FWAS. And on the horizon, by the year 2028, half of all new SASE deployments will be single vendor platforms, up from about 30% in 2025, according to channelfeatures.com. Continuous adaptive trust and risk-based access are honestly changing how organizations think about security. So what's changing? Instead of static policies like user X can access app Y, we're seeing a shift to continuous trust assessments that factor in device health, location, user behavior, and real-time threat intelligence. Why is this helpful? If a device suddenly goes out of compliance, let's say it's unpatched, its trust score drops, and access is automatically throttled or even revoked way before an attacker can take advantage. And looking forward, SASE consoles will display dynamic risk scores and automatically adjust access levels on a per session basis, really putting true zero trust into practice. Bringing it all together, these emerging capabilities, ZTNA adoption, AI and machine learning automation, UEBA, passwordless identity, automated cloud posture, and dynamic trust are forming a multi-layered defense that directly addresses the human and configuration gaps we see today. By embracing these trends, enterprise security teams can make sure that remote workers are no longer the weakest link, but actually a well-protected edge in the organization's SASE perimeter.